my name is Martina.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to the Young Leaders Podcast, giving tomorrow's leaders a voice today.
Join us as young people share their stories and what matters most to them.
We have a very special guest today, the Chief Executive of Stoke-on-Trent City Council, Jon Rouse.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on.
Really pleased to be here. I'm quite excited about it, actually.
So first of all, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Jon Rouse and I'm the Chief Executive of Stoke-on-Trent City Council, which basically means I'm responsible for the management of all the services that the City Council provides. And I've been doing that for just over 6 years. I'm a father of two girls, who are now 18 and 19, and spend most of my time taking them in the car to wherever they want to go.
A chauffeur.
A chauffeur, exactly.
Fancy
Chief
chauffeur.
Executive and a chauffeur.
Slash chauffeur. It has a good ring to it.
So,
are you ready?
into the most important question of this episode. What's the best oatcake filling?
The good thing about this question is I ask it on every staff induction and we have a vote. I don't quite throw people out who give the wrong answer, but there are certain answers which are unacceptable. But my personal answer is that I have sausage and egg with brown sauce, and the brown sauce is crucial. What would you go for? What have I missed out?
So for me, go absolutely crazy with the fillings. Bacon, sausage, egg, beans, onion and hash brown with barbecue sauce.
Oh my goodness, that does sound good.
I would pick, probably it's boring, but beans and cheese because it's a classic. But I will say my go-to sauce ever is mustard. I love any type of mustard, and I always put it on sandwiches, and I basically always put it on everything.
Do you go for English mustard or French mustard?
Or
Polish mustard?
Actually, Russian mustard, because it's very, very strong. And it's got those like little beads in, there's mustard. Yeah, seeds, the seeds. So it tastes nice. I was wondering, with a job like yours, what is a secret perk of your job that probably nobody knows about?
I think, and this is going to sound a little bit boring in some ways, but genuinely the best thing about the job, the best perk, is I get to meet all sorts of people. All sorts that other people wouldn't necessarily get the chance to meet. I was going to say, sometimes royalty, but actually, Matt here, he's friends with the king. So, it's I do get to meet, lots of really interesting artists and sports people and all sorts of people I wouldn't get the chance to meet in life. That is the biggest perk. Because it expands your universe, it expands your horizons. You get to see into other people's lives in a way that's a real privilege.
I think that's so true. But also seeing them from a different kind of angle, because I don't know, when you're meeting somebody who's famous, or maybe you have like a particular idea of who they are, even if they're not famous, and you actually get to meet them in person and speak to them and just maybe have just like a general chit chat. You see them as a person.
Completely.
And they're not like this abstract figure or untouchable kind of presence or someone you maybe really admire. But I think it just makes it more real, and then that's quite special.
Completely agree. When we unveiled the statue for Lemmy, the lead singer of the band Motorhead, in Burslem last year, the producer of his record company flew over from Los Angeles. I had just a view of what he was going to be like, and he was going to have an entourage, and we ended up just chatting in a pub in Burslem. And I actually found that I agreed with him on almost everything.
Really?
Two totally different lives. Me, a bureaucrat from Stoke, and him, a record producer from Los Angeles who's worked with some of the biggest stars in the world. And yet we could put us in a pub in Burslem and we just started talking. And that is what is so wonderful, isn't it? About meeting people who you wouldn't otherwise get a chance to meet.
Where are you from originally? Like, you haven't always been in Stoke, and you haven't always lived in Stoke. So what are your views on Stoke, and maybe like your favourite thing about here and our culture, and how do you see it from an outsider's perspective?
So I'm from Bradford in Yorkshire. I am a Yorkshireman to a core, but I love Stoke, and I love it for many reasons, and it reminds me of Bradford quite a lot, actually. The heritage, product of the Industrial Revolution. Bradford was about wool. Stoke was obviously about pottery, but, very similar in terms of the things they've gone through as well, in terms of, deindustrialisation and the impact that had on the population. But what I really like about Stoke-on-Trent is the people. I find them to be kind and compassionate, humorous. What you see is what you get. There is an authenticity about people from Stoke-on-Trent, which I personally find very attractive.
So I think that's something that everyone says, because we're such a deprived area. I mean, we've gone, in terms of youth funding, we've gone from nearly £100 per young person down to 10.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of builds what Stoke-on-Trent people are, because they do what they can with what they've got.
Yeah.
And I think that just...
They make do.
They make do, and I think that is such a key reason as to why Stoke-on-Trent people are so kind and so like caring of other people. Because the amount of people I've met that say they love Stoke-on-Trent for the people, it's just, I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think there's also, though, an underlying anger, which I totally understand, about what was allowed to happen to the city and how deindustrialisation affected us and still does, to some extent. We have reminders of it all the time, not least in terms of trying to look after the heritage from that period. And the problem was that when austerity came in as a policy nationally, the problem with it is that it was imposed the same all over the country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're a London, you'll find that difficult, but you'll cope with it because you've got that resilience. But somewhere like a Stoke-on-Trent or a Bradford, you're piling austerity on top of everything that has already happened. And that's why we saw things like the reduction in youth budget.
I think that's a good point to move on to, is the youth consultation.
Yeah.
So as you all know, YMCA, in conjunction with a few of the partners, surveyed 3,000 young people to get their thoughts on the landscape of Stoke-on-Trent and how they want to see Stoke-on-Trent develop over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see what your initial thoughts were in the consultation.
Yeah. Well, first off, hats off to YMCA and to everybody else who participated in the consortium, because I think it's probably one of, if not the most important report that has been produced in the city in the last 10 years. I went to the launch of it at the region. It was another opportunity to hear that voice. Certainly as a city council, we're taking its findings incredibly seriously. We're weaving them into all of our work now. But I think it's also been a really great reminder of the importance of youth voice generally.
Yeah.
So, for example, our new Children and Young People's Partnership, which we've just revamped, is going to have a young person as a co-chair, and it's going to have multiple young people from different backgrounds and groups on that board, which it's never had before. Yeah. So I think it's been hugely influential already, and I think it will continue to be so.
How wonderful. That's so inspiring to hear. Just for the listeners, to give you a little bit of background, because you may not know about our youth consultation, we put together a proposal in partnership with Keele University and the University of Staffordshire to do this big piece of research. We hit over 3,000 young voices, and to make it as broad and diverse as possible. So going to different schools, but also youth organisations, but also little grassroots organisations that work with just different demographics of young people, and do some creative consultation with them. So we wanted to find out what was important to them on a variety of different topics, but we didn't want to deliver it in a very formal and cold way that they wouldn't interact with. Because just having the background of working with young people, we kind of had an idea of maybe this is the better way to approach things. We had different groups go out to these schools, and I had the privilege to actually deliver some of the sessions, which are really fun to do. And then just kind of ask and frame a question, which, when you think about it, is quite important. So say like, what do you think about Stoke-on-Trent? Or how do you feel about your future? Which might be a bit of a daunting question to ask some of the young people that we did, but through the methods that we used, like drawing or, like picking out cards that kind of matched what they were feeling and then explaining it, we were able to gather so much valuable information and then analyze it and go through it. And then at the end, we got the 10 recommendations of what was really the most important things that affected young people's lives. We created a report, which you can find on our YMCA website. And it kind of summarizes at the end what those recommendations are. All of them are equally important. Yeah. There isn't one that's better than the other, but different things identify with different people based on what you've been through. So which one kind of sticks out to you? Yeah,
so you're right, they're all really important. But for me, and this was from the first time I read the report, is the first and the third one. The first one is about having safe spaces to go to and to do stuff, places to go. And the third one is about access to good mental health services. And the reason why those two particularly stuck out for me is because I think they're connected. I think one of the real problems, young people just do not have enough places to go, to be with other people, particularly their friends, but also, adults, and just enjoyable things to do. And I think that is a real gap. And we're often, as adults, we can have a tendency to be critical of young people because, you spend all the time online, spend all the time in their bedroom. But if there isn't the places, the safe places to go, to be together, what are your other choices? Hang out on the street corner? I think, it's an absolute priority working with all sorts of organisations, including the YMCA, to create these spaces, indoor and outdoors, to enable young people to get together and to do things together. And in doing so, to get some light mentoring, from adults, someone they can talk to, as well as each other.
So it's interesting you say about places to go, trusted adults, because the government released the new National Youth Strategy recently as well, which some of the key points in there is that children must have a safe place to go. They must have a trusted adult that they can go to.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, how do we sort of change that in Stoke-on-Trent?
So I was really pleased with the National Youth Strategy, and I was really pleased to see it. It's been a long time from having a National Youth Strategy of that type. But the point now is it's got to be backed up by real money.
Yeah.
It can't be conjured out of thin air, and local authorities haven't got the resources to invest to the extent that we'd love to in that type of provision. If government really believes that this is a critical part of our national provision, then they've got to back it now with some hard cash, and particularly from places like the YMCA or our Youth Collective, or from Ruby, all of those organisations that do brilliant work with young people to enable them to expand their provision.
Because you can't make something out of nothing. You can say it's a priority, but then how are you going to make it real? And then more importantly, make it accessible to young people, which requires money and resources. I wish I grew up in a time where it was so normal to just go to a youth club or to have all these resources or things available to you. And I think it's just kind of just gone downhill a little bit. And then I suppose it's only when you hear these stories or reflect back, you're like, oh, wow, it was so much better. The perception around young people is that they're just online a lot, or they want to spend time indoors and not really do much or be engaged. But I don't really feel like that's true. If there was an alternative, I think a lot of people would take it.
They would.
I would take it.
I said at the start, each and every one of these recommendations are important. That's true because every one of them link into each other as well. When you solve those park green spaces, you then have that reduction in the youth mental health crisis. You have the young people being seen as assets more instead of troublemakers.
Because it's a nice environment, isn't it? Yeah.
And also, if a group of young people are throwing hoops, they're playing basketball in a Muga, and they're being a bit noisy, rowdy, a bit of banter, maybe a bit of pushing, is that a positive or a negative? It's a positive, but that's not necessarily the perception. So there is a need for a change of mindset. I think my generation can be a little bit selfish about this. And we've got to recognise and, be more tolerant, I think, in terms of different ways of expressing ourselves.
I was quite lucky really, because I sort of grew up in between the generation of like going out and about and the sort of isolation. I mean, I didn't sit my GCSEs because I sort of come out of year 11 in COVID year.
Yeah.
So I was on predicted grades. And COVID had a massive, massive impact on not just myself, but the students as well.
Yeah, and I see that in my own daughters. So my daughters were 14 and 13 when they went through COVID.
Yeah.
And they missed, 2 years basically of experiences of socialisation, exploring teenage friendships. And even now, to some extent, I think they're still catching up, testing things that they probably would have tested years ago, but didn't get the chance to do so.
It's reflected in the workforce now as well, because you see a lot of people working from home. And before COVID, that wasn't sort of seen as much. Now it's sort of become the norm.
Yeah.
So you don't get that normal interaction even in adults anymore.
You build relationships beyond just your job as well by interacting with people. There's so many young people who are lost and they don't feel like they belong to anything. And that opens them up to a lot of dangers and makes them very vulnerable, because people ultimately, I think, want connection. Yeah. They want to do good rather than bad. I just think there just needs to be the opportunity to do the good.
And it can be very stressful for parents as well. I mean, my younger daughter, just yesterday, tea time, she went into the centre of Manchester to meet somebody who she'd met online. And, you're going, oh my goodness, how's this going to work out? And we were checking in with her regularly. And that is how young people meet each other. Yeah. My younger daughter met her boyfriend online. And it brings risk, but it also brings opportunity as well.
I think because we've sort of moved into this digital age now as well, something around 75% of young people said that they'd turn to AI for mental health support.
I mean, the problem with all of the AI at the moment is that it tends to tell you what you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. And that's quite dangerous because it likes to try to agree with you. And if you're basically saying, I'm feeling bad, my mental health is bad, I'm contemplating self-harming, the last thing you need is a piece of AI that is basically, empathizing with you. What you want is actually some sort of meaningful challenge into that and giving you an alternative.
Yeah, and I think that's why Stoke-on-Trent Youth Collective have been quite proactive with that. They've launched the Youth City.
They have. It's on my phone. I've got my app on the phone.
The only one in the country that I've been told of that does what they do. I mean, they've got apprenticeships, volunteering opportunities, and they've even got a section on there for mental health support. And you can press a button and it sends a message to 5 dedicated people to say that you need help.
I think we all recognise, not just in the City Council, but also the local NHS, that we do need to increase our mental health support for young people.
Massively.
So I think we're getting better at what I would call the preventative work, so more mental health support in schools and colleges. That's getting better. I think there's a gap between that and, if you like, formal services. So once you get into formal services, pretty good. But there's a long waiting list. So it's the gap in between and what help can you get while you're waiting. We have got some amazing organisations in Stoke like Changes, but they can't cover everybody. That is where I would focus. It's that in between the preventative work, which is now pretty good, and the formal work when you go into treatment. It's the bit in between that we need to sort out.
So there isn't so much of a gap, and then there's some help before you get your formal help.
Correct.
Because I feel like in that gap, it leaves a lot of space to deteriorate, for things to get worse, because you're just waiting. You're hoping that that's going to be the solution. But if there's little bite-sized pieces of help along the way.
I think that's exactly it. And one of the things really positive in the report, in the youth report, and it's the last finding, is that despite everything, despite all the obstacles, the barriers, the difficulties, young people generally are still hopeful.
Yeah.
And what you don't want is that hope to diminish or extinguish. What that service in between is all about is actually making sure that that young person is kept safe and kept hopeful that better times do lie ahead.
That's so important, is keeping that hope, because I think a lot of people have lost hope recently. And I think we're just starting to rebuild that now with all the amazing things that we're doing, and we just need to get it out more and more and more.
Yeah. I think that's what we see in the work that we do at the YMCA here. We have the privilege of working with so many young people who either interact with some of our programs or our customers here, and that support that they get, you can't even put into words. You can't sum it up how beneficial that kind of work is, that kind of support. It's almost like a lifeline. And a lot of that work is around building the confidence and building the hope in that young person that they can be more, that they can change their lives around, that the negative experiences that they've experienced don't have to carry on. They can just turn a new page and start something different. And these programs are so essential to developing these young people who are contributing to their communities and contributing to the workforce. And it is the future. We need to invest in our future, and the young people are the future.
Yeah. So my challenge, I agree with everything you've said, but my challenge back, my question is this: if Stoke-on-Trent is a city of many places, which it is, from Abbey Hulton to Weston Coyne and 98 places in between, it's a city that is made up of different places. We've got to be able to answer that question for young people for all of those communities. So if you live in Bullgreen, Norton, what's the offer there? If you live in Abbey Hulton, what's the offer there? If you live in Penkle, what's the offer there? And I don't think we can yet properly answer that question. I think we've got a bit of a patchwork quilt. I think we've got some areas where the provision is relatively strong. We've got some good volunteering community organisations. We've got maybe the NHS providing services into that community. And then we've got other communities that have got very little. The real task, I think, is to even that up and to find those areas that are cold, where there is very little for young people to go to get help, and make sure we fill it.
So I agree with everything both just said. I'm not letting what's happened define you. I didn't grow up in the best of childhoods. A lot of abuse. I was in the foster system. What I didn't do is I didn't let any of that define me.
We need to be humane and compassionate as well, because when you go from being a child to an adult, it doesn't just flick a switch at 18. And the reality is that quite a lot of adults who've had bad experiences are carrying that trauma that they experienced in their childhood, and that can impact their behaviours and life chances. So my view is that we need to be a city of second, third and fourth chances, that, it's never too late to start again and to create opportunities. If that might mean, doing a new training course or getting access to accommodation or whatever it might be. I sometimes describe this as, in Stoke-on-Trent, it's not about creating a ladder, because the ladder doesn't work for everybody. It's about creating a climbing frame that gives people different opportunities. And sometimes you might just need to rest. Sometimes you might need to go sideways. Sometimes you need to go down to go back up. And we've got to create a framework in the city that allows people those second, third and fourth chances, because I think we are a kind and compassionate city.
Addressing all of these issues, I think it is really, really important to have a focus on young people, but also I think holistically to look after our communities. The young people have parents and grandparents and maybe siblings as well that are younger. We need to provide support on all of the levels.
My view is you've got to work the whole family. And, we've now got lots of different ways of doing that. We use some what we call local trusted organisations. So these are very, specialist voluntary organisations that work in different parts of the city directly with families to support them, to stop them going into crisis or to help them after a crisis. One of the things I'm really pleased about is that, for kids now coming into care, they may go to a foster carer, but we increasingly use what is called kinship care. So this is where, if we get all the family together, we have a big conference, big meeting, and we look at what all the resources are within that family.
Just to touch on something, how is the Stoke Council going to support young people with these recommendations? What do you see the next steps being?
We are investing in emotional and mental health services, including in schools, but also in the community as well through our Family Matters programme. We're starting to increase once again youth provision and funding new youth work projects, which again is really important. We're putting a big emphasis on play. So if you've been to Hanley or Longton Market recently, but now there's soft play so that, so families can take their kids and they can get some support as well. We're repairing loads of playgrounds as well across the city. Our aim is to make Stoke-on-Trent renowned as a child-friendly city. And it takes everybody to contribute, businesses, charities, obviously ourselves, and it will take time, but it's about priorities, isn't it? The report and the recommendations are a challenge, but they're a challenge that comes with power, with authenticity, and we need to take them really serious and then be accountable to young people for, delivery of them.
And how do you think you're going to communicate that? A lot of young people said to us when we were doing this consultation that we get asked the questions, but then we give the answer and then we don't hear anything back, or we don't know what's the result of what I've said.
So I think there are two main ways. So the first is, well, maybe three actually. So the first is children and young people are going to be now strongly represented on our Children and Young People's Board. In fact, it's going to be co-chaired by a young person. So they will be directly involved now in the decision-making going forward. So that's the first thing. The second is the YMCA has set up groups to look after these recommendations. So we will join in those groups and be accountable to them as well. And I think they've chosen two recommendations in particular that they're going to focus on first in terms of delivery. And then the third is social media. One of the big changes for the council is that we're really good at things like LinkedIn and Facebook, but that isn't where the young people are.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to get our act together on Snapchat, TikTok, and goodness knows what else in terms of how we communicate.
If you're in a room with the Prime Minister and government ministers, what's your sort of message to them? And then what is your message to the young people of Stoke-on-Trent?
I would probably give two main messages. So the first is we're going to say, come and spend time with your cabinet in places like Stoke-on-Trent, find out what life is really like and get alongside us and work with us in terms of delivering our vision and our mission for our city. And then the second would be prioritise young people in all aspects, whether that's youth work, whether it's their start in life, whether it's routes to employment. I know it's a truism and it sounds trite, but genuinely the future of our country depends on it. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be me who's going to decide what the country is going to be like in 30 years' time. You know, it's people like you two who can decide that. So it's a conscious choice. We've got to shift power to the younger generation. The message to young people is stay hopeful, stay optimistic. You can be the architects of your own destiny. You know, you may face barriers, you may face frustrations. Be bold, you know, follow your heart's desire, go for it. There will be disappointments along the way. You will fail. I've failed many times. But pick yourself up and go again, because you've only got one life, so live it to the full.
Brilliant.
What a wonderful message. You couldn't have said it better myself.
Jon, it's been fantastic having you on the Young Leaders podcast. It's great to see how passionate you are about young people in Stoke-on-Trent. And I'm sure we'll continue this conversation again another time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Just a thank you from us. It's been a pleasure to speak to you and get your perspective on different things. I just want to ask a question to the listeners at home. Which of the recommendations from the Youth Consultation means the most to you? If you could leave it in the comments, maybe we can have a conversation about it next time.
If you want to stay in the loop with all things YMCA North Staffordshire, follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn as well, so you never miss an update and you won't miss an episode either.
But for now, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Young Leaders Podcast.